Thank you, Jarrett, and of course everyone, because he's next on the program to give the welcome remarks.
Yeah. Good evening, all. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Progressive and revolutionary soldiers are always ready. So here I am. Not sure if protocol was observed, but let me ensure that maintain the protocol already established. Let me just say thank you to Gabriel for asking me to give brief remarks. When I saw the email, I didn't hesitate, I responded right away, but I was surprised as to why me. I'm not a writer, but I guess I and Gabriel go way back, so maybe figure, all the comrades selected me to just say a few words. And it's an honor to be there. When Gabriel's first book came out, I immediately bought a copy based on curiosity and just to give some support to the comrade. I read it at the time, but what it did, it had me thinking back on my youth days. Then you're reading the book as an adult and you're reflecting on what you did as a youngster, and it had me thinking of how things happen and you wonder how the effect only in retrospect. One of the aspects of the book which caught me was when he mentioned the question of the cinema and the pit. For those of you probably a little older, remember the famous days of pit, house, and balcony. Now, when I put it in perspective, going through pit was an experience because you had to go through that struggle there. It's a tiny little hole. You go in for a t-shirt, white t-shirt, when you reach inside it might be a little brown. Some guys who started with long sleeve, when they reach in there, they maybe had half a sleeve or three-quarter sleeve. But it was a real struggle to go. But the nice thing is when you go through that struggle and you step into the arena and you see the people in house and balcony watching you, you felt a sense of achievement that, yes, I'm going through that struggle and you're feeling good, you know. A lot of people just wouldn't go close to pit at all. And then I thought of the whole social aspect of it. The people who went to pit were the people who probably couldn't afford to go to balcony or couldn't afford to go to house. So you had that social division right there, the pit with the people who they considered probably poor. Or you had box high up still. So you see the social division. So I just thought of it in terms of the aspect of that, and it had me thinking back of my days and the impact on the whole socialization at the time. I'm happy the email said brief remarks, so I really won't be long, but I just want to congratulate Gabu on this new aspect. I want to say that all of us are writers in our own sense. You write in your work, you write memos, you write speeches, calypsonians write calypsos, poets, put words together, but we have to commend those who have dedicated their time or take their time out to put these words into books and literary forms. We have had numerous examples. I mean, we know of them. We know of Dr. Alvin and J. We know of all the others around who have written books, Ali Glaser and the younger ones coming up. So we have to comment and give more credit to those who take time off to put these books together. Bernard Frampton recently wrote a book, very nice. Even recently, Jolly, everybody knows Jolly for her calypso prose. Jolly put a book together. So everybody is a budding writer, but those who dedicated to putting it together, we have my good friend there, putting books together. So we have to give a little more support to the art. But in closing, I want to say, but in the reflection of the arts, it's not just writing a book for writing a book's sake. I mean, this event is happening at the right time, Domfester, and celebration next week. We're going to celebrate Africa Week. So it falls into a nice time. But the key thing is, in our literary works, we have to be based on something. It's not just writing for writing's sake. You have to be sure that you understand your history, you understand your story, you understand why you're writing. You have to write for a purpose. But the most important thing when you write, you have to get a solid base into your history. And not the history as we know now that was miscued or directed to get us thinking into a particular direction. It's the history of liberation, which tells you exactly who you are, which makes you proud of being a descendant of Africa, makes you proud of being who you are. All other races are proud of their race. So we have to be proud that we are black, and we have to find out about ourselves. We have to find out the achievements of black people and pass on this information to the generation. So that's my brief remarks. I just want to thank Gabriel again and thank everybody for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dublin. It's really an honor for me to be here to act in this capacity because Gabriel Christian was my student at the Sixth Form College many, many years ago. And he's back and he has never forgotten Dominica. He has never forgotten his teachers. So I want to thank him for that. But who really is Gabriel Christian? I will just read some excerpts from his bio. He is principal of the law firm Gabriel J. Christian and Associates in Bowie, Maryland, USA. He taught history at his alma mater, the Dominica Grammar School and the Sixth Form College, before attending the University of the District of Columbia College of Business and Public Management in Washington, D.C., where he graduated with a BA in Procurement and Public Contracting. He studied law at Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C., graduating with the degree of Juris Doctor in 1991. He was admitted to the Maryland Bar in 1991 and is also a member of the Bar of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. He has distinguished himself as a Caribbean community leader in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and as an active civic leader in Maryland. Martin O'Malley, governor of the state of Maryland, appointed him to the position of Judicial Commissioner, Maryland Court of Appeals. In 2012, Governor Martin O'Malley appointed him to the position of Commissioner, Maryland Governor's Commission on Caribbean Affairs, on which he chairs the Committee on Youth, Education, and Workforce Development. In August 2014, Dr. Christian was appointed to the Board of Visitors of the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. He is co-founder with Major Francis Richards, Captain Frankie Tung, and Errol Emmanuel of the Caribbean Agricultural Network. Alongside his longtime collaborator and co-founder of Casse Press, Canadian Judge Irvin Andre, Mr. Christian has authored and co-authored a number of books on Caribbean history, society, and politics. We are familiar with In Search of Eden, Dominica, The Travails of a Caribbean Mini-State, Rain on a Tin Roof, Death by Fire, For King and Country, The Service and Sacrifice of the Dominican Soldier, The Life and Times of Dame Mary Eugenia Charles, among others. This evening, we really want to salute and congratulate Dr. Christian on his achievements. And let me state how much I've enjoyed reading and rereading Rain on a Tin Roof. Though it was first published almost 20 years ago, such was the pace of development between that ancient time when I was the author's age at the time he wrote, and the time he wrote, that I identify with many of the events and descriptions and smile and agree, yes, I do remember it was like that. The stories touch on a range of aspects of life in Dominica during the period. Because the author uses the first-person point of view, he takes us to the heart of the events described. There is a certain exuberance, a certain enthusiasm for life, which we see in the stories. There is vividness of description. We see what a keen observer the author is, and we also see his aptness with words. He achieves satire when the events commented on are by an innocent child, and we as adults reflect on what the comments are. We can almost see him writing tongue-in-cheek. He has the ability to laugh at himself, and this is something that's very endearing. But there is also a level of seriousness in the stories. He writes of the cruelty towards his sister who was mentally challenged. However, such is his optimistic nature that the story ends on a positive note with a sort of triumph for his sister. We see the serious reflections after an incident where an officer of the defense force gets shot, and wearing the uniform is seen almost as a kind of play acting, a game, which does not go well with life. And the character at the end says, when I get back, I will take off the uniform. So we see then the range of emotions portrayed. The stories touch on superstition, obia, education, but they are told with such wit, such humor, such the aptness for words which come through, that they are never heavy or pedantic. You can see in some of them the economic status of the island and family, an attitude of contentment which comes out in one of the stories when they're going to a funeral, and he said, we used our Sunday best for movies, for parties, for going to the gardens. And at the cinema, the one glass of Coke which the family shared. So there is that acceptance of life without perhaps that competition which we have today. Mention was made about the cinema, and this really was one of my favorites because it evokes the thrill of pushing, of jostling, as one made one's way through the crowd of people trying to get into pit when a good movie was being shown. In those early days, remember, the characters were called the star-in before we became familiar with these terms of the actors. And we know that the crowd tried to help their favorite character by shouting solutions, by giving answers, even it reminding them or telling them where the crooks were. So that when Clint Eastwood in the story apparently followed the instructions of the crowd, the author tells us the crowd roared, happy that Clint was following their advice, you know. Of course, you had the inevitable shouts of he gas, he gas. Okay, who can read without amusement the story of Good Foot? You must read that. Attempts to get the attention of a young girl and the lengths to which the narrator went. The step-by-step description, the slow unveiling of the girl as she comes on the porch and the author sees the various parts of her body, and then the author's attention to detail. We know in growing up that people would be judged according to the size of their calves. What was the Pato expression? Guam jam, yes, go guam jam, yes. And we have now that this young girl, who is, as I said, described in detail, little by little, and unveiling as the narrator tries to capture her attention. He bathed, powdered himself and everything. And then when he does see the calf, he said the lack of a calf showed that she was the leg of someone who is driven to the Convent High School in a Volvo. So she didn't have the guap jab, indicating that she was, let's say, from the country, accustomed to climb hills and carry load on her head. She was a gentle girl. And this then was the calf of a young girl from the Convent High School. So these are the kind of, the humor that he tells us in the stories. Then we have too the early days of tourism, when perhaps people were not so familiar with seeing the tourists walking around. And we can just picture the troublesome young boys, and the author identifies with them. I suppose he was there. And when they saw these tourists passing, their expressions evoke so much. What do they shout? Hey, Columbus, come and discover us. You see, it evokes so much of our past, our history, and our attitude. They're shouting to the tourists, hey, Columbus, come and discover us. So young boys who are troublesome. We grew up too in the era where, because we did not have the many supermarkets, the stores, etc., people tried to make the little tablet coconut cheese for sale. And I'm sure we are familiar with the fact that our parents, our grandparents, tried to deter us from buying too much of it by sometimes making up stories. Maybe they felt that some of the conditions were not too sanitary. And here we have this young boy who is so scared because they tell him the lady used to bite the coconut to make the tablet, and she used to salt her bake with her sweat. We know how physically impossible that almost is, but such was the belief then that was generated that the author took them seriously. We also have the instance of the satire when he describes carnival. Okay, so we know that if you were a Roman Catholic, you could jump in carnival and drink your rum. On Ash Wednesday, you could still go to the Catholic Church, clasp your hands, close your eyes, and pretend that hard drink and bad words hadn't crossed your lips. With a knowing smile, Father so-and-so would bless you and then put a cross of ashes on your forehead. And the little narrator, the persona in the story, says, the ashes on your forehead made everything right again, and that was that. Okay? So again, a serious reflection, but at the same time, because it is told by the young boy, the narrator, you get the full effect. The kind of wide-eyed innocence, almost like Charles Dickens in the way he writes some of his stories. So we have that at it then, and the attempt at the explanation. Okay? There is an amusing incident too. Sometimes it shows the futility of the education system, where we learned rhymes, sometimes with no apparent meaning, and he had to learn at school. The grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill, and he marched them down again. And when they were up, they were up. When they were down, they were down. When they were neither up or down, they were neither up nor down. But then he wondered, why did he march his men so mercilessly? This is a young boy thinking of it, a young inquisitive boy, a boy with an imagination. Why did he march his men so mercilessly? Maybe they could do it in foggy England, because England had so much fog and was so cold. And he comments, "The sun was really hot on my island. I know that we wouldn't have wanted to march up and down hills for nothing." Okay. Come to think of it, maybe we were made to sing about York so it could breed some British backbone into us. Okay? We didn't have much homework. We would sing about how London Bridge was always falling down. Now and again, we would hit on the cow jumped over the moon, or perhaps Dan is the man in the van. Okay, so the education system, many others are, as I said, really, they're commented on. So please, I really want to say that the stories are about us here. And they touch on so many different aspects of life. A time, before funeral homes, and yet they do not become pedantic. They are never boring. As Andre wrote, by the juxtaposition of ideas, images, symbolism, and the use of literary devices such as alliteration and assonance, the writer communicates to his reader and achieves an amazing economy of language, which often belies the profundity of meaning in the stories he writes. His stories recreate the sense of community which he knew growing up in Dominica. Each story depicts a particular episode or event in his life. And if Bigfoot, what do I call it, Goodfoot, is really one of those, I would challenge him to come and do the Goodfoot for us. When he describes the dance with such detail and the different intricacies, I wonder how he was able to achieve that when he tried to get the goal. And after all his attempts, after building up, almost as if he had a poetic muse inspiring him to write the story while he tried to get the attention of the girl, he did his dance and used his powder and everything, and you fall flat, literally, physically, in every sense, because what did the girl shout at him when he tried to get her attention by his special dance? "You Mako, I'm not in your nonsense." So we have this, almost a sort of build up, as I said, very poetic language, vivid description, the author gliding by, trying to get the girl's attention, describing her almost with a sense of awe, unveiling her bit by bit, and when she does look at him, her comment is, "You Mako, I'm not in your nonsense." So please, as I said, the stories are delightful, and we have to support the efforts, and we do ourselves a favor, in fact, by reading the stories. I think we were supposed to have comments by Dr. Bully. So. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I didn't see this, so I didn't start it. So.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Pleasant welcome to everybody. My apologies for being late. I had to be at another function. Actually, it was the graduation ceremony of the Dominica Institute for the Fine Arts. Actually an institution or a body of students and faculty which very few people in Dominica know actually exists. But it's 4 years since it was opened, the Institute of the Arts, and it offers tutoring in about 7 or 8 different aspects of fine arts, with about 120 students, adults, teenagers, and kids. This afternoon they're presenting their achievements for the year. Very impressive function. It's still going on, in fact, and that's what kept me. And I told Gabriel that I would be a bit late, so I'm glad I made it on time. Just to say a few words, actually, to talk and to reminisce a little bit about the 70s there, when we're also fired up with the whole idea of independence and the fact that we'll be taking care of our own business, as we called it in those days. The age of a very hopeful age, basically, age of expectation, of venture into a new world, and the exploring of the arts which were flowering at the time. It was a time when, I guess, in preparation for independence, we were looking into ourselves, the whole question of cultural nationalism, as it was called, or Creole nationalism, when the leaders of the Caribbean were exhorting us to be proud of who we are, who we were in terms of our people, in terms of the people seeking a new beginning, one which we thought was going to be a beautiful experience, being masters of our own fate, and the whole question of looking at literature as a major part of that. Many of the writers of the 70s and late 60s have become the icons of Caribbean literature. I'm talking about people like Earl Lovelace and the Walcott brothers in theatre, and George Lamming and Samuel Selvin. And they basically were writing in dialect and writing about their own experiences, and that gave us a lot of hope for the future. Of course, after independence, the dream began to fade very quickly. We began to realize that we weren't, in fact, in charge of our own destinies to the extent that we thought we would be. And I think it's sort of like hope that has sunk deeper and deeper as the years have gone by. But recently I've been feeling that there's been a resurgence of interest in the arts and music and literature. And for that reason, we've been happy to know that people like Gabriel, and especially the authors of Pont Press and the publications that they have brought forward, have been encouraging others to write a vast range of subjects. Biographies being a major one, but also creatively with short stories, the early works of both Arundel Thomas and Gabriel himself, and also of Dr. Irvin Andre. So the republication of this book, I think, is a major step in the right direction. Gabriel and I go way back to the days of the Dominica Grammar School. I got back from university in 1972 and taught there for 12 years. And a number of young men like Gabriel and his contemporaries went through my hands, so to speak. Not with canings, but with ideas and encouraging them to write and to look at Caribbean literature and look at our own culture. I also look at the new means of communication, because one of my most memorable events with that particular group of young men, and it was only men at the time, young men at the time, it wasn't co-ed education at the time. But I got a call one day from Mrs. Olive Harris. I guess you all remember Mrs. Harris of the blessed memory, saying that at the Dominica Teacher Training College, which was just across the road, they had received something called a videotape recorder, the very first on the island. And she wasn't too sure what to do with it, so if I could come over and take a look at it and see what it was all about. The video recorder was about the size of this desk, with two people like Earl Lovelace and the Walcott brothers in theatre, and George Lamming and Samuel Selvin. And they basically were writing in dialect and writing about their own experiences, and that gave us a lot of hope for the future. Of course, after independence, the dream began to fade very quickly. We began to realize that we weren't, in fact, in charge of our own destinies to the extent that we thought we would be. And I think it's sort of like hope that has sunk deeper and deeper as the years have gone by. But recently I've been feeling that there's been a resurgence of interest in the arts and music and literature. For that reason, we've been happy to know that people like Gabriel, and especially the authors of Pont Press and the publications that they have brought forward, have been encouraging others to write a vast range of subjects. Biographies being a major one, but also creatively with short stories, the early works of both Arundel Thomas and Gabriel himself, and also of Dr. Irvin Andre. So the republication of this book, I think, is a major step in the right direction. Gabriel and I go way back to the days of the Dominica Grammar School. I got back from university in 1972 and taught there for 12 years. And a number of young men like Gabriel and his contemporaries went through my hands, so to speak. Not with canings, not with canings, but with ideas and encouraging them to write and to look at Caribbean literature and look at our own culture. I also look at the new means of communication, because one of my most memorable events with that particular group of young men, and it was only men at the time, young men at the time, it wasn't co-ed education at the time. But I got a call one day from Mrs. Olive Harris. I guess you all remember Mrs. Harris of the blessed memory, saying that at the Dominica Teacher Training College, which was just across the road, they had received something called a videotape recorder, the very first on the island. And she wasn't too sure what to do with it, so if I could come over and take a look at it and see what it was all about. The video recorder was about the size of this desk, with two spools. And the videotape actually went through a particular head to do the recording, and just like an audio tape recorder. It was in black and white, but the wonder of seeing images immediately after being taken was just a fascinating experience. Because before that, because there were movie cameras, Super 8 and 35mm and 60mm, but you had to send these away to be processed, and it took about 3 months before you came back, and then most of them didn't have sound anyway. So it was a very strange thing to say. But we're going to use this camera, put it on, and immediately afterwards see it with picture and sound at the same time. So I said, sure, we'll take the drama group over. And for about 3 or 4 afternoons, we went, about 15 or 16 of us, myself and the students, and we made short movies. And guess who was the starring, so to speak? The starring, he took to it like a duck to water. He was unafraid of his image being portrayed immediately, and his voice coming through with the strength that it still has today, and louder. So that experience of seeing ourselves on video for the first time was really an eye-opener for us, and one that we'll always remember. So to know that Gabriel is continuing that particular process of recording the events and the times and the atmosphere that pervaded this 1970s of searching for identity and embracing it, I think is well reflected in the book throughout. So Gabriel, I thank you again for recording these events and recording these stories, and I wish you a very, very long success and a long career in your writing of all types, especially the creative type. So go out and get the book. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Bully, because your experiences too are part of this whole island development and what we are. At the moment, we're supposed to have another musical interlude with Mr. Jarrett Jean Jacques. So please come up then.
First of all, let's have a long, strong, and profound round of applause for the excellent exposition presented by the dear Dorothy Leevy. And coupled with that is the enormous good fortune, the enormous sense of gratitude that I have at this moment to be here, where I attended sixth form, was tutored with excellence by the likes of Miss Leevy. Extremely fortunate to be a Dominican, to have been born here, and to have had the excellence as a child of being tutored by the most distinguished purveyor of the literary arts, the great Alwin Bully. Let's hear it for Alwin Bully. How many of us have the good fortune? And so I must share that good fortune with you. Because here I stand, not knowing that when I came in this morning to the University of West Indies extramural, we called it extramural in the time, Dr. Severin, I must apologize. I'm showing my age. Open campus. University of West Indies Open Campus Food Security and Agriculture Conference. To look across and see a Dominican who must be given his roses way before that time. Who, when I was a cadet at Londonderry Youth Camp, with the dark clouds of the summer showing signs of hurricane, and the rain beating on that tin roof, and coming crackling over the static on the radio, Dominica, as they called it in those days. The most excellent rendition in sound of Dominica's history, the Dominica story as told by Lennox Honychurch, Dr. Honychurch. Let's hear it for him. So what I've tried to do, brothers and sisters, dearly beloved, church maybe, is to capture in that which Irvin and I have tried to do with Pont, Casse Press. Institutionalize memory. The Greeks had the Grecian urns. The Egyptians had the hieroglyphics. The Chinese had Confucius. English, a lot of, or literature resides in that root, had William Shakespeare. Now, we're not trying to shake a spear at anybody, but we will try to shake a pen. And somewhere it's written that the pen indeed is mightier than the sword. No nation, I believe, can rise further than its writers. The writer makes the record for the legislation that passes through national parliaments. The writer is the lawyer who files the brief, as my brother from Maine, Scott Gardner, who I met yesterday and who is all the way from Maine. Give a round of applause for Scott Gardner. One of our adopted Dominicans, we're happy to have him. The writer teaches. The writer creates in our minds places to which we've never been and we never get to go. And so, before I say any more about my parents or my teachers, I want to say something about a Scottish-American guy by the name of Andrew Carnegie, the Iron Magnate, who in 1905, through Governor Bell, donated £5,000 to found the Roseau Free Library, or the public library, where Irving and I, and many others of our generation, and continuing, were able to go and immerse ourselves in the world of literature. So posthumous though it may be, a round of applause for Andrew Carnegie, brothers and sisters. Where do I start? Our father, Wendell Christian, was a member of the London Book Club in 1930, before the war. And I think that tells much about the fact that in our home we had books aplenty. The Holy Bible, of course. Jesus Christ doing the mathematics with the loaves of bread and the fish. Jesus Christ, of course, on the Mount of Olives, and right before he checks out, guys are all gone to sleep, and he says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The next morning, I'm not sure if Dennis was there, but the next morning, they met Peter, and Peter said, me, I wasn't part of that political party. There are 12 guys, not me. So the Bible was there, and it was part of that construct, but there was also the march of civilization, and the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Aztec Empire, the Inca Empire. So having a home within which you had a certain degree of learning helped. But we cannot underestimate the fact that social stability and being born in a time when social change was hurtling ahead, pursued by the likes of the late Frank Barron, who we remember at this moment, who played his part in the building of the new grammar school, pursued by people like Oliver Edward LeBlanc, who was a cultural nationalist and worked with Sissi Codoran and others like Scobie to do Dies Dominica 1 and Dies Dominica 2, which were magazines within which you found snippets of Dominican history, Dominican literature, where we had National Day celebrations, the Wop Duet and the Mese Quick, and the short story competitions coming online. So we see then that I did not evolve in a vacuum, that it was an enabling environment, that it was an environment born of teamwork. You know, we grew up next to the Windsor Park, and we'd have in those days people like Jose, and we'd have people like Hosford, who still sings for the Swinging Stars, and people like Bogoroy. How many people remember Bogoroy? Bogoroy wore glasses, and we would say 6 o'clock and Bogoroy cannot see. So if he was a goalkeeper, the ball would go this way and he'd dive that way. The ball would go that way and he'd dive this way. Bogoroy, I remember the game against Suriname, and that's in the book. I mentioned that in that corpus we had, for instance, people would play what you call self-game. Anybody knows what a self-game is? When the guy gets the ball, he's dribbling the ball, he's showing off to the girls, he never passes the ball. And what happens to the ball? He loses the ball, and he can't score. But brothers and sisters, dearly beloved, as a country, if we understand the essential importance of teamwork, of working together, of holding hands, of respecting each other, of being able to agree, not disagreeably, but agreeing to disagree, and still maintaining an essential humanity and amity, we can build a better community among ourselves. And we can be an example to the world at a time when the world is severely troubled. I'm coming here this evening and I hear of another Egyptian airline down. Places in the world where there are people who lose their lives over religious differences. United States, where there is a campaign led by a man who might trump all common sense. But this is the time within which we live. And as human beings, small though our country might be, we have given much greatness to the world. The size of our nation, the extent of our natural resources are no indicator of our ability to accomplish great things. And I'm about the sum total of all of you. Irving and I, Pont, Casse Press, I repeat, is about the sum total of all of you. We are Dominica's children. And children are what they learn. Our mother took plywood, Sam will tell you, and blackboard was made of that plywood with black paint and a hammer, so she could teach us in the backyard. And people's children passing by, seeing our mother, who was a member of the 4-H club, and I saw the 4-H here this morning, would join the class. So when we've achieved something, we have to give credit to our parents, credit to our teachers, but more importantly, credit to a community that was more sharing and more caring. Though we had less, we did less with more. Am I right? More, I'm sorry, more with less. More with less. You know, I'm happy that Eisenhower Douglas is here because vicariously, that is through his brothers, I learned something about his father, doing more with less. His father had just about 2 or 3 children. And of course, he was able to do so much. Of course, that's not true. He had many more children. But through Mike and Ruzi, I learned that RBD would say things like, cream must float. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Cream must float. What he meant essentially was that even if you were a poor station in life, your parents may not have achieved much in economic terms, that by your exertion of intellectual excellence, you could rise among the community of nations. And so I don't want to say a whole lot more because we'll be here all night. But what I do want to try to capture is that we have seen literature not as simply writing for writing's sake. We have seen literature as an essential instrument in the national development mission. It's not by accident that Dennis Shillingford is here. I know he likes a fine book on occasion. But it's not by accident that Errol Emanuel is here, or we have 2 professors from the University of Maryland, or Captain Tong flew down from the Virgin Islands, one of our early aviators, who bought a plane and did fruit transport. It's not by accident that we have these posters here about cocoa, because what we've tried to do is to try to see if we could wrap into one single ball of wax the ability to make the record in literature, make the record in history, and move from conceptualization to actualization in bringing out a product that all Dominicans can be proud of. So I want to thank the Open Campus. I want to thank Dr. Severin, who's been a leader in intellectual development, who I have detained for the evening. Dr. Severin, my apologies, sir. But I thought it was important for you to be here. I really want this to be open mic night. Open mic night so that we understand that the individual in history is very important. But the individual as himself, as herself, cannot stand. That I stand on the shoulders of the cultural greats of our Caribbean who went before. V.S. Naipaul, A House for Mr. Biswas, Miguel Street, Middle Passage. V.S. Naipaul, A Brighter Sun. Mango rose. Mango long is to make it strong. Mango rose is to lift up she clothes. Samuel Selborne. V.S. Reed, of the Moranbah Rebellion and the New Day. We've heard of Lamin and the Castle of My Skin. Guyana's Edgar Mittelholzer, the Children of Guyana. And of course, now we have Rain on the Tin Roof. Where do I start with Rain on the Tin Roof? Let me say to you, Portia is on Facebook and she just broke a leg. But she's getting better now. The real Portia, in the story, is on Facebook. And she did have a Volvo because her father was a good mechanic and he got a third hand or fourth hand and made it into a first hand. That's how good he was as a mechanic. But that story would never be memorialized if I didn't take the time to try to capture the depths of what it meant to go to the Botanic Gardens. In those days, Lennox Honychurch again reminded us this morning, we called it Station. Take me back, boy, to me, mama, I tell you. Take me back to me, papa, I tell you. Take me back, boy. Not like that, not like that. What kind of scene you on? I'm not going behind station. So it was the botanical station, part of the constellation of botanic gardens that the British set up to do what was called commercial botany. They took a guy from the Royal Navy called Captain Bligh and they sent him to the South Sea Islands to get breadfruit. Because in the days when the wind would becalm a ship and it would take weeks, months to get to the Caribbean, people would starve if they had to wait for the wheat. So they wanted a plant that could grow breadfruit. And he went to the South Sea Islands and the guys mutinied. The famous mutiny on the... They threw him overboard. And he traveled 3,000 miles as a master seaman and survived. And he went back and he got the breadfruit. And today in Dominica, we have Yampe. We say, God bless Captain Bligh. And a round of applause for Captain Bligh for being indefatigable, ladies and gentlemen. We need to know the roots of the Yampe in Dominica. How important is writing? Writing is that infrastructure, that scaffold upon which the edifice of the nation is built. Let me repeat. Clem John isn't here, but he used to call me, Clem John the cricketer, he used to call me Comrade Infrastructure. Because sometime he heard me at age 14 use the word infrastructure. And he never forgot that I used the word infrastructure at 14 years. The writer creates the scaffolding upon which infrastructure of a nation is built. Can you imagine a British nation without Shakespeare? Could you imagine the United States without Longfellow? Longfellow, who famously wrote, "The heights attained by great men and women, while attained, was not attained by sudden flight, but they were..." Can you imagine that? Those, you may call them cliches, but those sayings, those principles. And a round of applause for Captain Bligh for being indefatigable, ladies and gentlemen. We need to know the roots of the Yampe in Dominica. How important is writing? Writing is that infrastructure, that scaffold upon which the edifice of the nation is built. Let me repeat. Clem John isn't here, but he used to call me Clem John the cricketer. He used to call me Comrade Infrastructure. Sometime he heard me at age 14 use the word infrastructure. And he never forgot that I used the word infrastructure at 14 years. The writer creates the scaffolding upon which infrastructure of a nation is built. Can you imagine a British nation without Shakespeare? Could you imagine the United States without Longfellow? Longfellow, who famously wrote, "The heights attained by great men and women, while attained, was not attained by sudden flight, but they were..." Can you imagine that? Those, you may call them cliches, but those sayings, those principles, that ethos, colors a nation, gives purpose to a people, builds a self-confidence, gives us skill, gives us the ability to be creative. And eventually, if we can hold it all together in a community of purpose, if we can understand that united we stand, cliche though it may sound, brothers and sisters, divided we fall. If we can understand that, Dominica can be that beacon and that sanctuary for a troubled world. So let us remember that, let's build it, and let us keep it. Let us remember it, let us build it, and let us keep it. I want to digress quickly before coming back and concluding and opening the floor for open mic night. That increasingly, when we were coming in, we had some Texans. I met the brother from Maine. We have Chinese. Last night I went to a restaurant, it was called Fusion. It was good. I asked who owned the restaurant. I was told it was owned by a Russian. So the Dominica today is much more cosmopolitan, I would say, or I would submit, than the Dominica that I knew. I remember the first Chinese restaurant in Roseau as a child was called Kenko. Anybody remembers Kenko? Yeah. Closed down after a few months because they said they couldn't recognize the meat that was being served. Today we have more Chinese restaurants, I'm told, than we have local restaurants. So we are evolving. And as we evolve, we will only be able to retain our sense of humanity, our Kalinago rootedness, our Afrocentric rootedness, and our British and French rootedness, because we are a hybrid nation. And all those persons and peoples who came together, sometimes in not so perfect union, but came together nonetheless, by dint of history, by dint of circumstance, to form who we are, must find a respected place within the fabric and framework of that nation. Because if some segments of that nation are exalted and others denied, we will not have a perfect union. But if we all remember and understand our common humanity, if we pay tribute to each and every strand, if we find purpose and meaning in each and every strand of our nation, Kalinago, African, Middle Eastern, European, French, British, now Russian, who knows? If we can pull it all together, we can be, in fact, that 21st century civilization that will be attractive to others who will want to come and live within a rule of law nation where things work, where we respect our environment, where we are productive, where we care about each other. Yes, indeed, where we love each other. We have been driven to do all that we've done by a very basic thing: love. Love for an island, someone said, and I can be directed by more learned brothers and sisters here who might know from whom the quote arose from or who it originated from. Love for an island is the sternest love. Is that Phyllis? Thank you. She was right. She was right. I feel very aggrieved many times